We turn now to New Mexico and the Juvenile Justice Continuum of Services and Graduated Sanctions with Scott Vincent and Gary Staley. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Gergen. I'm here to refute something said well over 100 years ago by one of my heroes, William Tecumseh Sherman, who said when he was commander of the Missouri and had to deal with the Indian Wars, that all experiments based on experience are doomed to failure in New Mexico. Well, we're here to tell you that we are an experiment in progress and we're succeeding, and I wish the general was here to see it because he might change his mind about New Mexico. I want to give you a little bit about you have our plan, obviously, and what's going on in our district. In 1998, when we initiated this concept of graduated sanctions and deinstitutionalizing children, we had 2,856 juvenile offenses in our district. After 9 years, in 2006, in a region that is growing at about 5% a year, we had 857 juvenile offenses. That means that in a county that's growing, in a district that's growing, juvenile crime has been reduced and the number of children in incarceration has been reduced by at least 60 to 70%, depending on which category you look at. Also, recidivism, which is probably one of the most important things you look at in juvenile justice. Our recidivism rate is less than 30%. We're in the 70% rate in reducing recidivism over 9 years. And the final point I make is I operate a juvenile detention center. That's really the only role that a county has in New Mexico in juvenile justice. So we've had to do things outside the box, just like all these other programs. We opened with 24 beds. We now close that facility, and it was full, by the way, when we opened it because my district judge sitting in the back filled it up very quickly. Since 1996, we have closed that unit. It now houses 48 federal marshal prisoners and makes the county about $500,000 a year in profit that goes back into this continuum of services. We now hold only 3 juveniles in our facility. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Mr. Staley here is also.
What is innovative about our model? Well, first of all, we think the partnership linkage across silo funding sources and the bureaucratic minefields is rather innovative in the juvenile justice arena, at least in New Mexico. And if this is not terribly innovative, at least consider the significant positive outcomes that we've had. Second, the ability to capture meaningful, accurate, and consistent data across multiple agencies over a 10-year period is rather difficult in the bureaucratic field and hopefully somewhat innovative in juvenile justice. Number 3, there is innovation in this model's ability to reduce service duplication and increase the number of dollars going into direct services. Lastly, the ability to translate juvenile justice data into economics is very unique. And this translation has helped us in at least 3 ways. First, it has helped us demonstrate cost savings to funders, including our state legislature. It has helped us encourage reinvestment of once duplicated service dollars into identified needs, especially and excitedly into front-end services. And also it has helped us secure sustainable legislative dollars with the added blessing of being able to decide as a local collaborative how to effectively use these dollars. Can we measure our results? I think you have before you the data, yes. Prevention, we have found out, really does work. What's the evidence? There are half as many of our youth entering the juvenile justice system in our area than there were 10 years ago. The data demonstrates our communities are safer, at least from juvenile crime. As Scott has mentioned, offenses against persons reduced by 61%, property offenses 72%, and total juvenile delinquency 70%. There are also 73% fewer repeat offenders. And it demonstrates also that the costly components of the system can be reduced significantly. 57% fewer petitions are now being filed by the district attorney. No offense, but attorneys are not cheap. 74% fewer cases now require court hearings. These are a few examples of how we have been able to demonstrate our effectiveness. Can this be replicated? You wouldn't want to replicate Scott and me, but the rest of it you certainly can.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ed Dorn and David Osborne.
These are very impressive statistics. Have they been independently verified?
Yes, they come from our state of New Mexico family client tracking system.
And what did they do to verify those data?
We've also had an independent study. Scott can address that quickly.
Yes, I was on the Governor's Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee, which is the state SAG for the Office of OJJTP money. And they required independent evaluation at the end of our 5-year funding cycle. And that study should be a part of your packet. I'm sorry if it's not. But we had to have these numbers independently verified. And I think we made quite an impression on the person who wrote the study. But we do have 2 independent reports confirming our numbers.
Did you want to follow up on that, Ed?
Well, just to be precise, this report mentions a study conducted in 1999, which was shortly after the program was started, and another in 2002. Are those the evaluations you're referring to?
Yes, they are, sir.
All right, fine. David Osborne.
I want to follow up on this question. So you don't have any evaluation since 2002?
That's correct. We do, however, have data on the number of arrests that are, the number of arrests, the number of repeat offenders, the number of children in incarceration. Those are numbers we can produce. But as far as independent, no, we have not since 2002.
Okay. So my question is, I was reading this and thinking, wow, they're doing so much for these kids. And then I got to the budget, which is $333,000 a year for 3 counties. And it was startling. I mean, how can you provide all these programs for that kind of money?
Actually, that is only the grant money. That does not include the money that the county or city or the other communities, Silver City and Grant County, commit. I know my county alone each year commits $200,000 from its general fund to after-school programs on the prevention side. We also, we have done some pretty innovative things. I'm the only county manager in the history of New Mexico to sign a purchase order for 30 guitars. And believe it or not, we are currently building a 4-screen movie theater in Bowling Alley, and the county of our county government is actually doing that. So when you talk about the budget, I can tell you where it's coming from. It's coming from the savings of $30,000 a bed for each juvenile incarcerated. And when you go from 25 incarcerated at $30,000 a bed to 3, you've got quite a bit of money to play with. And my commission alone, my county commission, I can't speak for the other counties, put 100% of that money back into the prevention side. So that $300,000 is just a blimp on what we spend in our community.
Carl?
This is to Mr. Staley. You talked about replication, and given the results and your enthusiasm and in your statewide role, what efforts have been made in New Mexico to replicate this program statewide?
Since JJAC funded us initially, and we began to show some positive results. There are now 5 other sites in the state of New Mexico who are at some phase of developing a continuum of services. They're not quite as mature as ours is, but they're certainly moving along. And they're funded also by SAG and also by the Casey Foundation is involved in that.
Bill Klinger?
How does this add to or advance the ball in terms of comparison with the Tarrant County, Texas program that apparently you went to and visited and used as a model? How does it advance the ball from where they were?
Yes, in fact, Mr. Cockrell came down at about 3 years after we started and was very impressed and took back some programs that we had initiated and was going to implement them in Tarrant County.
Yep.
We have moved so much of our resources into the prevention side that I think that's what Mr. Cockrell was somewhat amazed with.
Yeah. Let me ask you this final question. We're puzzling over. Perhaps you have it. Ellen, do you want to give voice to it? Go ahead. It may be the same one.
So, I used to work in juvenile justice. So, are you involved with the Casey Foundation's JDAI program or a different program? The Juvenile Detention Alternative or something else?
No, we did not. We were not sponsored by any Casey. The original money came from the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention to the state of New Mexico and then was funded to the 6th Judicial District. That's where the initial grant money came from.
So the question I have is about widening the net, because one of the challenges in juvenile justice work, and this comes up with the guitar and the movie theater, is that you can pretty broadly sweep in a group of people and think about that as prevention. On the other hand, it's hard to know whether without the guitars and the movie theater, those kids would have committed crimes also. So how do you think about focus in your work, and how are you able to make an argument that you've for prevention?
Well, one of the things we do measure is the number of kids coming into our system. It's half now what it was 10 years ago.
And for what offenses were kids being held when you had 24 beds filled? What were those offenses?
Many of those offenses were pretty high severity. We had a lot more gang issues back then than we have now. We hope that the continuum has contributed to that, to decline.
You hope, but you don't have a particular way of tracking.
Well,
Prevention is a nebulous,
Okay.
unmeasurable, I'm afraid, term, and you simply have to, as a community, believe that investing in children early on will somehow have a positive effect down the road in all their behaviors, including dropout rates in school, getting into the juvenile justice system, and then going on to higher education. I don't believe you can measure prevention. You just have to believe in it and spend a lot of money on it.
Right. We're going to extend this just one more moment, because this program has actually stirred some questions within the committee earlier in the day, and it's commendable that you have the state legislature, which has now provided what sounds like permanent funding, and yet at the same time there were some red flags that have gone up around this. There is some criticism out there of the program within your own state. Who would have reason to criticize the program, and can you help us understand why?
I think part of it had to do with the legislature wondering whether that money should be coming out of Children, Youth, and Families Department,
Right.
or whether it should be funded directly to a sort of an isolated area down the southwest part of the state. We think that's been resolved now.
Is there any issue regarding the detention practices?
I think I can answer directly to a controversial program, and that's our boot camp. A number of people who are not familiar with it think that the boot camp is an extraordinarily harsh reaction to juvenile crime. But when you look at the outcomes of the boot camp, which is operated by our police chief who is here, so if you don't like it, blame him. But The boot camp is a controversial program.
How many students actually go through, or how many young people go through that?
Right now, we have 18 in the boot camp. Here's the alternative, the reality. We have 18 in this particular academy,
Right.
and we're running one academy every 4 months.
So
Here's
you've
the
got around
alternative.
18 or 20 every
Yes,
4 months.
maximum of 20.
Right.
These are kids, they're in drive-by shootings. These are in kids that have broken into my house and stole my gun. These are kids who stole my motorcycle and cannibalized it in order to buy methamphetamines. These are not kids that are jaywalking. Now, the alternative to the boot camp, which is seen as somewhat harsh and a little bit brutal at times because they have to carry logs, physical fitness is a large part of it, and it's a military model. The criticism of that is, I think, refuted when the alternative is very simple. Those are kids that our judge would be sending to the state institution.
So, in effect, your detention numbers have gone down because you've instituted a
Absolutely.
boot camp and sent people there instead. And
Absolutely.
you're finding the recidivism is lower for people coming out of boot camp than what you were finding out of people who were in detention.
Glad you brought that up. That's a fat pitch, Dr. Gurdon. Thank you. Out of our boot camp, we have an 80% graduation rate. That's not in your statistics, that graduate high school. We also have a number of kids from the boot camp who are serving both in Iraq and Afghanistan because fortunately their youth records are expunged and they have no records as an adult. And we have a number of kids who are now mentoring other kids after they graduate high school in the boot camp and come back for free and work for the boot camp, having some effect on these kids. And they're actually attending our community college.
Wait, now, your last external evaluation was in 2002. Was the boot camp up and running?
The
then?
boot camp was up and running from the first year.
Okay.
In fact, it was one of the very first programs we put in, funded it to the tune of $425,000 of local money.
Okay. You've helped a great deal to clarify. Thank you very,
I
very
hope
much.
that helps. Thank you.